Hey, what's going on guys? I just want to make a quick video going over the new changes to Revenant and Nezha. This video is just going to be a brief overview of the changes that were made, and it's not going to deal with a full comprehensive build. Typically with these reworks, there's more than one patch the DE goes over and changes the abilities, so because of that, I'm going to wait for these frames to be in a more stable place before making a comprehensive video about them. I am planning to make videos about them at some point, but just not right now. So first up, let's take a look at Nezha. With the rework to Nezha's abilities, we also got the Nezha Empyrean collection, and the skin from it looks amazing. Honestly, I'm more excited to play Nezha because of this skin than I am the rework to his abilities. But talking about the rework of his abilities, Nezha's made some good steps to becoming a more useful Warframe. I definitely wouldn't call Nezha amazing still, but the rework has definitely taken Nezha in a better direction than he was before. And I do want to just preface this by saying that I almost never played Nezha before just a couple hours ago when the rework happened. He's probably my least played Warframe. And that's for a good reason, because basically the only good ability he had was the Warding Halo. And for this rework they changed it. Now instead of working like Rhino's Iron Skin, Warding Halo only prevents 90% of damage taken. The remaining 10% can damage Nezha's health and shields. This is both a good and a bad thing. It's bad because we can no longer protect against 100% of damage taken, but it's also good because it expands what Nezha can use. And what I mean by that is that Nezha can now use arcanes like Guardian or Avenger very easily, because while he mitigates a lot of the damage, he's not going to mitigate all of it. Previously with Warding Halo, you weren't able to use arcanes like this. And I also want to talk about health conversion as well, because they just changed it during this patch so that you no longer lose health conversion stacks when taking damage to your shields. You only lose a stack upon taking damage to your health. This is a big buff to the effectiveness of health conversion. It makes it much easier to maintain that 1300 armor bonus when you have all 3 health conversion stacks. And now that Nezha can take health damage, you could also use mods like health conversion on him. And while having tons of armor isn't necessarily as good as Nezha blocking all incoming damage, it's still a good way to mitigate damage on Nezha. They also made it so that you're invulnerable while casting, as well as just after detonation, which happens when your Warding Halo runs out of health. And when it's detonated, the Warding Halo will cause an AoE heat proc to enemies. Warding Halo is not the ultimate defense like it used to be, but it's still very good, especially when you have armor. And a big part of that is the rework to his second ability, Blazing Chakram. Now when you hit enemies with Blazing Chakram, they will be marked, meaning they take increased damage depending on your power strength. And if you then kill a marked enemy with Blazing Chakram, they have a chance to drop health and energy orbs. I've played around with this a little bit, and it's kind of hard to hit enemies with the Chakram properly, but if you get a good proc, you can drop tons and tons of orbs. And a big part of that is his fourth ability, which I'll go into in a little bit. But like I said, this is a little finicky, and it seems like the Chakram doesn't hit properly sometimes, which might just be a bug that they're going to work out later on. The patch notes do mention some faulty targeting that they worked out for this, but I mean, if this is the final product, then I'm not entirely sure it's going to be that great. They also added a charge throw to it if you hold down the button, which increases the damage and the range, and it'll cause the Chakram to go straight forward and straight back. It won't bounce around to multiple enemies. Overall, I'd say the changes to the Chakram seem generally good. Marked enemies taking extra damage is very nice and adds some good team utility. And if you can manage getting kills with it, the health and energy orbs that enemies drop can be very beneficial. But like I said, with what little I've played around with it, it seems kind of hard to proc consistently. I think it's just the Chakram AI isn't that great, but I'm not entirely sure what the issue is. And it's going to require me to play more with Nezha to figure it out properly. They also changed his first ability, Firewalker, to be duration based instead of channeled, which means that you can now gain energy while it's active. I think at base the duration is about 30 seconds, and it's refreshable so you can just keep casting it to maintain Firewalker if you want to. Honestly, the best change to this ability is you can gain energy while it's active. Its duration is fine, although it might be a little annoying to keep up constantly. And they changed Nezha's fourth ability, Divine Spears, to cast faster and you no longer have a mandatory animation at the end, which is a nice quality of life change, and it'll probably cause people to use it more often, especially when pairing it with your Blazing Chakram, because every time an enemy is hit with a Chakram while it's impaled, an additional Chakram will spawn from that point, which can then chain to additional enemies, making Chakram deal more damage. This also helps Chakram spawn more orbs. That about covers it for Nezha's abilities. Overall they seem okay, although I'd still say Warding Halo is Nezha's best ability. But like I said, I really haven't had much time to play with him yet, and I'll have a more complete opinion when I can do more testing. Now let's move on to a Warframe I've actually played a decent amount, Revenant. Today Revenant got some buffs to his abilities that are putting him in the right direction. They changed his Enthrall, Mesmer Skin, and Reeve. I'll come back to the Enthrall, but let's talk about Mesmer Skin and Reeve. Mesmer Skin can now be recast before you run out of charges, which is a huge quality of life and big buff to the skill. Before you'd have to wait for your charges to run out, which was both clunky and pretty frustrating to use. Now if you see yourself getting low, you can just recast it on demand, which makes Mesmer Skin a much more consistent way to avoid damage. The next change is to Reeve. They both lowered the energy cost and made you immune while in the ability. I would say the lower energy cost is actually a buff to Dance Macabre, because it allows you to Reeve more often while you're in the ability. And if you're like me, reaving around while you're in Dance Macabre is really fun, and I find it useful both for survivability and positioning. The changes to these two abilities are excellent, and I think even with the energy drain nerf to Dance Macabre, Revenant's starting to look like a very solid mid-tier Warframe. But now we get to the Enthrall. DE made a few changes to the Thralls to make them more tempting to use. However, going from like a 0 to a 1 on a 1 to 10 scale doesn't make me want to use them more than I already was. It's just so damn awkward to create Thralls, and they've tried to remedy that in this update by letting Thralls enthrall more enemies. But the limit of Thralls is 7 and it's really not enough. Even if you could enthrall more enemies, I still can't see myself using this ability, because instead of wasting time enthralling them, you could just kill them instead. And if you're playing Revenant, you're probably using Dance Macabre, and if you're using Dance Macabre a lot, you're not going to be enthralling tons and tons of enemies. There are a couple special circumstances where you can enthrall tougher enemies, which will allow you to kill them easier, but overall, I really don't see this being a useful ability. But to encourage us to use it more often, they also added more death effects to the Thralls. So now, they'll create the pillar, and now while the pillar's down, it'll shoot out little projectiles, which in my opinion have pretty insignificant damage. You can now also detonate the pillars by hitting them with your Dance Macabre, but instead of enthralling and then using your Dance Macabre to detonate the enthralled enemy's death pillar, you can just kill them with your Dance Macabre so much easier. I don't really understand how this is going to be useful, and I'm hoping DE revisits Enthrall to make it more impactful in your gameplay. But as it is, even with the changes, I don't really see this being useful. That's going to do it for today's video, guys. I just wanted to give a brief overview of the changes to the two Warframes, which I'm hoping you guys found helpful. And like I said, I'm planning to do more comprehensive guides on both of them, but I want to make sure their abilities are stable first. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you later.
Try a different ability.